All right, so kind of going along with the woke conversation, I want to talk about cancel culture and, in particular, CNN and the hypocrisy behind cancel culture, with which this network has kind of been propagating for the last couple of years. And we at the Salty Nerd Podcast, we don't like to get political. Like, we're not a politics channel. In fact, we like to
That's why you
create
never bring
content.
me on anymore.
Yes, we like to create content that gets people an escape from like the political stuff. But this actually has some This story has some far-reaching uh, ramifications into like the streaming realm and like some of the content we're going to be getting from Warner Media and stuff like that. So I wanted to touch on it, and I'm glad that Mr. Reagan and Chris are both here for this because politically, I'm in line with these two gentlemen, and they have some really great insights into this world. But for those of you who don't know, the guy who ran CNN for the Trump years and a couple years before that, Jeff Zucker, has been ousted from his position as the head of CNN. And this is coming on the heels of the CNN or of the Warner Media Discovery merger. So I'm just going to give you guys like a brief background on what's going on here. Basically, AT&T had no idea how to run a movie and TV studio when they bought Warner Media. They took on a lot of debt to create programming that they didn't know what to do with. They kind of lucked out with HBO Max because that ended up being a big success, but on everything else, they were losing money hand over fist. And basically, AT&T decided to spin off Warner Media and merge it with Discovery. So Discovery was a separate company that came in, bought out Warner Media for like $47 billion, something like that. And so those two companies are in the process of merging and waiting to get approved by the Biden administration for doing so. And AT&T is actually, they're not selling off Warner Media, they're spinning it off into a different company that they still own shares in. So basically, Discovery and AT&T are going to be sharing Warner Media, and AT&T is going to focus more on getting rid of some of the debt that they took on and on their telecom business. Instead of trying to play the Hollywood game, they're going to let Discovery do that. Now, in the midst of all this, CNN head Jeff Zucker, who also was in charge of like the live sports division and stuff like that, he has been ousted because he didn't report a relationship with a coworker. Now, apparently, his relationship with the chief marketing officer of CNN, a woman by the name of Alison Gollust, has been an open secret since the 80s. Like they were both married to different people, but apparently they'd been seeing each other for a long time. They said that their relationship changed over COVID, the COVID lockdowns, and they started a physical relationship that they did not disclose to CNN. However, pretty much everyone who works in the news business has said these guys have been boinking since the 80s, and everyone knew about it. It wasn't like a big thing. But the reason that this happened now is that CNN fired Chris Cuomo. And Chris Cuomo, who was one of their primetime news anchors, he was the brother to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. And during the COVID pandemic, Andrew Cuomo would come on Chris Cuomo's show, and they would like talk about how great of a governor Chris Cuomo was and all this other stuff. And long story short, Chris Cuomo got Me Too'd, or I'm sorry, Andrew Cuomo got Me Too'd, kicked out of office. And then in response to that, CNN fired Chris Cuomo for violating their policies, and just because he was like tangentially connected to Andrew Cuomo. Now, Chris Cuomo did not like the fact that he got fired and the fact that CNN refused to pay him his severance. So he started a lawsuit against CNN and Warner Media in order to get this back. Now, what happened is that the guys in charge of Warner Media took a look at this, and they're like, "Oh, we fired Chris Cuomo because he was in violation of our policies. So if they find any other violation of our policies, they're going to, win this lawsuit. And we're going to be paying out the nose." So,
well, and the rumor is, Matt, that Cuomo, who is suing CNN, as you mentioned, his lawyers made quite an issue of the relationship between Zucker and Gollust. It wasn't just that Warner's media were preemptively playing defense. It's that Cuomo's lawyers brought it
Well,
right out into the open.
yeah, but here's where the plot thickens, right? So Alison
Sure.
Gollust, the side piece of Mr. Zucker here,
Yeah.
so she used to be Andrew Cuomo's comms director, and it's said that both Zucker and her pressured Chris Cuomo to have his brother on so that they could push Andrew Cuomo. And so the idea that Chris Cuomo got fired is directly related to what these two did and Gollust's connection with Andrew Cuomo. So it's this big like crazy mess. But in addition to that, so there was talk that when the Discovery merger goes through, and you'll see that David Zaslav, he's the guy who's in charge of the Discovery networks, and he was going to be the one in charge of Warner Media once the merger went through. So there was talk that,
Sorry, those pictures are cracking me up.
yeah,
Look
know,
at
right?
those guys. Jeez.
Yeah, just two old white guys, right? But so these two gentlemen, right? But when the merger goes through, it was expected that Zucker was going to step down and stay on as an advisor, and they were going to get a new person to run CNN. But so Zucker was on his way out regardless, and I think that the thinking behind the Warner Media heads was that, well, we're going to be getting rid of this guy anyway once we merge things, so might as well just sacrifice him now and kick him out and cover our butts that way. But the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is that one of the primary investors in Discovery, a guy named John Malone, really hated what Zucker did with CNN. Like, he's been an open critic of CNN for a long time. And he basically said that Zucker came in, ran the network into the ground by hiring pundits and commentators and getting away from like the news end of things. And John Malone, once Discovery took over, he was going to pressure Zaslav to basically replace Zucker with someone who could get CNN back on track as a news network, as opposed to what it currently is, which is basically the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. So all this stuff went down, and I want to hear what you guys have to say about this, because this could, it probably won't, but it could jeopardize the merger between Discovery and Warner Media, simply because it hasn't been approved by the regulatory bodies yet, and also it creates a big headache for David Zaslav, because now he's got to find someone who can step in on day one and take over not only the news division but the live sports division as well. So, Mr. Reagan, this is kind of your bread and butter area. What do you think about all this?
Well, I think that this is really a blessing in disguise for CNN. I don't see how this is a problem for anyone over there.
Well, apparently a lot of
Jeff
people
Zucker,
over there are upset about it.
Again, why? Right when I start talking. He's gone. Come on, what are you doing?
Gotta love that cat ass in there.
Come on. There you go, buddy.
Porn and cat videos.
Yeah.
All in one.
Right when I start talking as well. No. I look, CNN is a disaster. All right. You got all these cases of people getting into trouble for far worse things. I mean, what Zucker did was not a big deal. Hey, buddy. What he did was not a big deal. He had a relationship he didn't disclose. You know that that they're not getting rid of him really for that. I mean, it has a lot more to do with what you're talking about. This is all kind of an excuse because the girl didn't get fired, right? The chick,
No,
chick's
she
still
kept her
working there.
job. Yeah.
So it's just a BS excuse. I mean, I think that Chris is right there. Hey, man. They're terrified about the lawsuit with Chris Cuomo, and they're afraid a lot of their dirty laundry is going to come out. So they're just getting rid of Zucker. I don't know if it's going to save them in terms of like looking bad. The whole company is just a bunch of weaselly degenerates. I mean, when you're hiring people, not because they're the best at their job, but because they toe the line, you're going to end up with problems. And Jeff Zucker had a vision for the company that did not work out, right? Anytime you have a vision to change a company fundamentally, it's a gamble. And what Jeff Zucker did was he turned it from, because I used to watch CNN. Like every single day I used to watch CNN when I was in college. And yeah, it was left leaning, but it was relatively neutral. At least they tried to at least appear to be somewhat neutral. And in the last maybe 10 years, they've shifted, especially during the Trump era, they've really shifted hard left to, yeah, the cat is stealing the show. He's a good cat. He's a good cat. He's just loud and he's very pretty. Yeah, CNN is literal trash. I mean, that's what people think now. Even leftists think this. There was a report that came out the other day that said that Tucker Carlson gets more views than either MSNBC or CNN in his time slot. Hold on. With Democrat viewers. With Democrats. Democrats watch Tucker Carlson more than the other two networks. Isn't that crazy? Not combined. Combined, they beat him. But how incredible is that? You've got a total...
what's funny, Chris, is that the so just recently after CNN lost their airport contract, their ratings tanked 90% under Jeff Zucker's watch.
Oh no!
So like
I didn't hear that. That's amazing.
Yeah, literally 90% of their ratings were coming from being on in airports across the country. Now, Chris, last week when we talked about it, you laughed. You thought that was funny. What do you think about this whole rigmarole? Do you think it could affect the merger? Do you think that CNN is in trouble, or is this a blessing in disguise?
I mean, probably a little bit all of the above. I doubt it affects the merger, frankly. But, look, the funny thing is how laughable the notion of talking about journalistic ethics and integrity in a conversation with a 24/7 cable news network is. Like, the notion that there is going to be any adherence to all, or even a reasonable expectation of anyone watching, that there is not just total disregard for the ethics of the profession going on in front of the camera and behind the scenes. I think everybody acknowledges that, right? But one of the reasons why Chris Cuomo got fired, which I think maybe glossed over a little bit in explaining the backstory, and it was a complicated history to recount, is that here he is ostensibly a journalist, okay, covering the story of the governor of New York, who was forward facing as the hero of the pandemic response, and then had all kind of problems when that gets dug into, facing this controversy. And it turned out that while he was speaking to the American people as a talking head on behalf of CNN as a news network and reporting the news, he was behind the scenes actively working to subvert the women who had come forward and made accusations against his brother. And that is, I mean, again, going back to what I talked about last week, Matt, you go to J school. That's another term, like showrunner, which is like a snotty way of saying journalism school. They teach you this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you actually went to journalism school, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it all makes sense. I mean, the only mistake you make is if you take it seriously or you believe it exists the moment you exit the classroom. Because, look, it was... Yeah, I remember years ago when there was a controversy that there was an NBA ref who got caught fixing games. And the comment was, the problem for the NBA is that nobody was shocked. They just asked, I wonder which one they caught. It's kind of the same deal. Like, no one was shocked when it came out that Chris Cuomo was allegedly cooking the books for this story with his brother behind the scenes. And that, again, Matt, is where the plot thickens when it comes to Zucker and this termination, and Gollust because of her past political connections to Andrew Cuomo. And as the guy at the top of CNN, which purports itself to be a news network, I mean, Brian Stelter obviously insists that it is, that he would tell you with a straight face, God bless him, that they adhere to journalistic ethics and
Mr. Potato Head himself.
Yeah. We should play the "How Old is Brian Stelter" game. I don't know if you've ever looked that up. It's astonishing. Google it. It's I missed it by at least a decade.
I'm older than Brian Stelter, I think.
I think everybody on this live stream is considerably older than Brian Stelter. I myself am old enough to be Brian Stelter's dad. No, but look, when you're the head and figurehead of the network, you're answerable for all of that. And if in fact one of their major news shows and perhaps one or more of their executives were colluding with one of the 50 governors who was embroiled in a political scandal to manipulate the way that story was going to be reported, That's a really, really big problem. And unless you are willing to come out and say, listen, Jon Stewart was right. We admit it. Our business model is, in fact, arson, and this is all kayfabe. You got to fire the guy. You got to do it.
Hey, do you guys remember when all those celebrities like Trevor Noah and stuff like that were coming out as Cuomo sexuals?
I remember. Yeah. I do remember.
That didn't age well, did it?
Not-
Real quick, we
did
got
not.
a $5 super chat from Broken Birds for the crew. Buy a cup of coffee. Thanks so much, Broken Birds. We appreciate your super chat and your support, and we will buy a cup of coffee with that money. Now, kind of
Why
related
are
to
the birds
this.
broken?
Oh, you don't want to know.